When it comes to the realm of international relations, we generally think of political theories or schools of political thought that we can align ourselves with. However, the one overarching theme, or rather the progenitor of all political thought, is realism. And the idea of realism is to try and explain the reality of international politics, emphasizing the constraint on politics by the egotistical and self absorbed nature of humanity.
Whoa, back up. Self absorbed? Egotistical. Well, yes, that's exactly what a lot of scholars of realism say about human nature, with Thomas Hobbes making this point in his book Leviathan after the same thing was made obvious by Greek historian Thucydides and the Italian diplomat advisor Niccolo Machiavelli, the author of The Prince. These three, who we'll call affectionately the realist roundtable, all agree on one thing, since it is what they base their respective theses on. Human nature is one made up of competition and paranoia, suspicion and self-interest, which dictates the actual state of nature, which, according to Hobbes, is poor, ugly, nasty, brutish, and short. And it's characterized by three things: equality, scarcity, and diffidence. Now, scarcity means resources in the world are very hard to come by, and those of you that do come by it would technically end up hoarding them. Equality is not established on the basis of strength, but on the basis of mentality and tenacity. And then diffidence is the existence of eternal suspicion or paranoia. But they agree on the fact that in order to survive and gain power, you can and must do whatever you deem necessary. I'm not going to go into excruciating detail here, but there's three accounts that you can look into to understand what they mean by this approach. Thucydides states this in the Mytilenean debate or the Melian dialogue. Machiavelli makes this obvious by quoting the conduct of two people who weren't well liked by the people but fulfilled his criteria. One, Mr. Francesco Sforza or Girolamo Riario, and then the literal son of Pope Alexander the 16th, the Duke of Milan, Cesare Borgia, and his account of what happened to the Ramiro de Orco. Hobbes does not necessarily have many examples of what we can quote, but he does mention what ordinary people can do to escape the state of nature, which is to sign over their rights to a leviathan, or an overarching sovereign that effectively will do what he deems necessary to protect the people from themselves.
An oddly autocratic idea, isn't it? Well, truth be told, it's not really when you consider that every single conflict we've seen in this world alone so far and throughout history, it's been dictated by the very principles of realism. Our own politics is based in realism, and there's absolutely nothing that can change that. I mean, you might identify yourself as a conservative or a liberal, when really you're in fact just a realist. What you're doing is you're looking out for your own interests. You're seeing whether the greater good outweighs your own self-interest. And to that point, here's a little theory for you that'll really blow your mind. The idea of justice and fairness in justice is a total myth. It's always been that way. The greater good is a hoax because reality operates in relatives. The truth is, there is nothing in this world except for our own self-interest, and there is rarely anything that outweighs that. In fact, a pop culture movie actually made that reference back in 2019 with Avengers Endgame. It had a very poignant moment in the plot where Tony Stark travels back in time to grab Pym particles and find the Tesseract in 1970 to ensure that the plan that they're working on works out, which results in him meeting his father, and they begin talking about their children. That leads to what is perhaps the most realistic quote to ever come from a comic book, and one that is an accurate portrayal of human nature and, as a result, society in and of itself, which is...
What would be so awful about that? Let's just say that the greater good has rarely outweighed my own self-interest.
In short, realism is the most accurate depiction for the kind of world we live in, with these explanations coming from centuries ago, from the Peloponnesian War back in South in the early 400 BC, up to the Italian Renaissance as an aftermath of the English Civil War, and serves as an explanation to the Cold War conflict itself. And that's pretty much it. Our whole lives, our very society exists within the confines of realism, though we like to say we're liberals or don't subscribe to such ideals, but even the rejection of such ideas is inherently realism too. So, now that I've probably changed your whole outlook on life and possibly given you a major existential crisis or an identity crisis, I do hope you've learned something of substance, and if you enjoyed the video, please do like the video, share it with someone that you think needs to be given a reality check, pun intended, and subscribe to the channel. Everything really helps. And that'll be all for this video, and I'll be seeing you next time. Till our next communion.